Welcome to Empowered Returns, a show that surfaces forward-thinking real estate advice that investors and developers need to help them invest smarter and build better.
All right, welcome to another episode of Empowered Returns. I am PT Vineburgh, the founding partner here at CHARLESGATE, flying somewhat solo today on the host front with no Mike DeMella, but really excited to have Caleb Manchester joining us today. He is the president of Gansett Ventures, a local developer here in Boston, and really fired up to have Caleb join us and give us his insight on the development world. What's up, Caleb?
Appreciate it, PT. Where's DeMella today?
He's just doing his thing. You know, he's kind of realized that I'm really the better looking, more engaging face of the franchise here, and so I'm just kind of running with these past few weeks, anyways. But it's good. We're really excited to have you. Been a good. Turned to a really close friend over the years and a real valued client and someone I admire the work you're doing. And let's kind of jump into it. So let's give a quick background on how you got started with Gansett. You know, you kind of worked in the development world previously, kind of bigger institutional shop, and then ended up making the jump to going the entrepreneurial route. How did that all come about? And
sure,
how's it going?
It's going, PT. I ended up at Cabot & Forbes after I went to grad school in Connecticut. Ended up back here in Boston. I was actually here after undergrad as well, but worked with Jay Doherty and some of the boys over at CCNF up until 2016. Great guys over there. Love Jay. In touch with all those guys still. Some guys are off doing their own thing now. Mike Bajulian's running Alliance for the Northeast.
Cool.
So didn't leave because of them, put it that way. CCNF is a merchant developer, right? A lot of the developers around town are merchant developers. Probably part of my background influences this, but I don't want to be a seller of real estate.
Yeah.
My goal, and what we're putting into practice now is building rental housing for long-term ownership.
Yep.
And there's a future exit there somewhere, a liquidity event. But that was the reason. And where we're at right now, look, we've between stuff that this is since 2016, but between stuff that we're doing now and have done, we've got about 800 units in varying stages of production, a couple complete. It's about $450 million of cost. So hopefully a lot more than that in value.
Right.
And we'll see what the market does.
It is. I've seen some of your work.
And so look, that's the goal that we're working towards is, long-term ownership, creating residual, have some liquidity events.
Cool. So kind of like typical trajectory, right? When you go out on your own, you've also done a couple condo deals to try to kind of build bankroll to, I'm assuming that was sort of the strategy behind that.
That was a strategy. I didn't have any money. Yep.
Yeah, there you go. So the first one, that we actually worked on with you was Lumen Charlestown. It was a pretty cool project. Can you talk about sort of how that came about and just sort of how that went for you, what you learned, on that kind of first project? Because it was kind of a tough, let's be honest, right? Like it was kind of a tough site in a lot of ways.
Says the broker who brought it to me.
Yeah,
right? Okay.
But in a good way, we knew that there was still good value there and that there was a market for it, and all of that proved to be true. But, on its face, it was kind of wedged between some non-ideal abutters. And it was a tight site, from a construction standpoint, I'm sure. And just kind of talk about that project and sort of, how that kind of helped you as the springboard to, the growth you've had getting towards the 800 units.
Yeah, look, it was 2016. It was the first project that we did. At the time, I needed to do a project, right? I was not a Charlestown guy. Right, at Cabot & Forbes, we worked in Quincy, worked in Cambridge. We didn't do much in the city of Boston. And Charlestown is a place that I had spent some time, but not a place I had ever done any work. I think I had the benefit coming into that project of not being a Charlestown guy. And you see that for local guys in a lot of markets. There are areas that have a taint on them from something in the past, right? So being next to public housing, in their mind, they remembered 20 years ago when that place was a disaster. Right. I lived in the South End at the time, and I backed up to public housing in the South End. I had no issues whatsoever, right? It's urban infill development. It is what it is. People live together. It's mixed income. It's great.
Yeah, it's actually kind of, because we've worked on a few different projects that have had that dynamic, and especially talking at the nascent stages of those projects to capital partners, lenders, that comes up a lot. And I really got to say that and candidly surprised me, because I thought it would be much more of a factor on the first project we did, and it was a total non-factor, and that's why I had the confidence in it when we brought.
What was that first project?
That
Where
was the one in Lancaster, 1501 Com Ave in Brighton, right? So that was a budding Fidelis Way. And then when, again, our experience there, which was that it was a total non-issue, really sort of opened my eyes to the fact that, to your point with the South End analogy, and you look at everything that's happened around Blackstone Square and all that in the South End, and that's just a part of urban living. And I think that it gets sort of overplayed in a lot of people's minds that it would have some kind of perceived negative impact on a development. But I think Lumen sort of validated what we experienced in Brighton over in Charlestown, and it really didn't come into play during the sales process. And
and I think again back to other folks maybe not seeing the vision there. It was a relatively small project, right? It was 30 units, so it was probably a $15-16 million project from soup to nuts there. And that is, there were as a result, a lot of local guys looking at it. You didn't have somebody parachuting in from New York to do a 30-unit condo project in Charlestown, right? So the guys that were looking at it were all guys who, were familiar with that location and been for a long time. That was a benefit to me, obviously. And that was a tough one to get done, PT. I mean, I think you remember it, right? The guy who was flipping the permit was a friend of yours, or a client of yours, rather. And, he wasn't able to deliver the due diligence materials. We ended up having to go talk to the underlying seller.
Yeah, I remember that. There's some idiosyncrasies with putting that together.
Yeah,
but that was a classic case of, like you said, you needed a project, right? We really wanted to put that deal together, and there was a level of sort of resourcefulness and hustle that went into that, and I got to credit you on really spearheading that. Given the dynamics we were talking about, you had to.
Yeah, and likewise for you not murdering me, but
you know what, you had to do what you had to do to get it done. You did, and it all worked out.
Yeah. So we ended up getting a little bit of extra due diligence out of the underlying seller. Went hard deposit, and ended up, I had to go through every page of my Rolodex to raise the money to do the project, but we ended up getting it done.
Yeah, so that's a good segue. So that was your first project in partnership with what's really become kind of your de facto affiliate, right?
Yeah.
With Helge.
Yep.
And so kind of talk about that, and maybe that's a good segue too, just, touch on them specifically, but then sort of how you've seen that change over the course of your projects. A, your project's gotten bigger since then, but B, the capital markets have clearly changed a little bit the past year. So just sort of talk about that relationship with, Helge specifically, and then sort of parlay that into sort of what you're seeing as you're trying to put some of these other things you're working on currently together.
Yeah. So I had met Oleg Uritsky the year prior to doing that project. We had talked a little bit. And, when I called him with that project in hand, he was excited. And I was excited that he was excited. And we kind of hit it off right from the beginning there. So we raised a little bit of outside money together, went and did that project, and we very quickly rolled right into, and PT, you did a fantastic job, you and your team, selling that project out. But we rolled pretty quickly into a project up in Revere, which is a market that we focus on very heavily. And so Oleg, his team, and I have, kind of parlayed the same structure that we had in place on the first one into several projects now. The next one was up in Revere. It was a 75-unit apartment building, better fit our overall model.
Yeah.
So Helge Capital is they're traditionally an owner-operator of real estate, right? And so me and my team function effectively as a development team. We have one project that we're working on outside of Helge Capital, but everything that we do otherwise is with Oleg and his team.
Yeah. So kind of how have you seen the, that climate change for you guys over the past year, both, with Helge? Have you had to sort of restructure how you're looking at these deals given the capital markets, or the types or availability of capital that you're able to collectively go out there and find, and debt? Sort of what's that looked like as you kind of have rolled into, again, you've got Bennington going, which is a bigger project, and I know you're working on something else, which I want to get into in a little bit. That's really cool that
Sure.
I think would kind of excite people because it's outside the box. But
yeah, look, both Helge and us are very selective. We don't have huge capacity to do a large number of projects, so we really pick our spots when we're doing a project. I have a small team; it's only 3 of us. Okay, and on the capital market side, and a Helge team, they're a small team as well. Their property management team is bigger. In the last year, we've seen, obviously the availability of debt has diminished. We're paying, in some cases 7.5%, in some cases up to 10% interest on construction debt right now, which is super challenging to our pro formas.
Yeah, and just to contextualize that for the audience, like what was that at 90O in Revere?
Oh, Jesus, 3%.
3. I was going to say, 3.5. Yeah, not insignificant.
Yeah, so it's it's $1 million hit to the budget in some cases, right? And that'll burn your contingency in a heartbeat, and you need that for other unknowns. Always. So
All right, so let's sort of we talked. You talked about 90O. You mentioned Revere specifically. That's a big market for you guys. Before we get into the project that I kind of want to focus on, let's just sort of talk like macro level entitlement, permitting. You've got some experience now in Boston, right, with Lumen, obviously with 90O and Revere. How has that impacted where you're going to hunt for deals based on your experience to date and just kind of the sort of macro climate right now, kind of candidly, politically, that's driving some of the, what I'll just say is arduous permitting and entitlement process, and sort of how are you looking at that? And are there like areas you just won't touch? Are there areas that you're gung-ho on? Are there, how are you kind of looking at that as part of the secret sauce as to what you're really trying to go execute on versus what you're like, what, forget it, we're not even going to bother in that, place A or place B?
Yeah, we kind of know what we're good at, right? And we know what we don't know. And all these municipalities operate differently, different political climates, different consultant teams that operate in those markets. If we're going to go somewhere outside of a market that we're typically in, we have to spend a lot of time diligencing our team and ourselves getting up to speed, right? We've had a fantastic run in Revere. We love the city, love the location. We've got a great team there. And so we've spent a lot of our efforts over the last few years in Revere.
The project that I referred to a couple of times, right? I just think it's like super cool, A, and then B, it's definitely a little bit different than, some of the other stuff that we've talked about on empowered returns, just because, most people are just buying, an old gas station or, a vacant piece of dirt and, then permitting and developing. But this is a trailer park, and it's talk a little bit about sort of, how you found it. What are the different dynamics that you're dealing with? I know that you're kind of in your, still in your planning phase as far as what's going to happen there. But just as you've, had to, as you acquired it and now have been operating it, and sort of what the delta is on the amount of value there, given some of those circumstances that are just different than, like I said, the typical parcel of land that people are going to acquire to develop on.
Yeah, sure. So this is another project with Helge. Oleg and I acquired the site about a year and a half ago. The site it's in the city of Revere, let's say. And, things that we like about the site are the things that we like about sites in general. Access to transit, need for housing, in the city of Revere, close to amenities. It's tucked right behind Suffolk Downs. So you're getting new employment there. You got retail. You've got access to the T. You've got access to the beach. Lots of good bars and restaurants.
Yep.
And so that's why we like the site. It's close to Route 1A. If you drive, you can flip around and be in Boston in 15 minutes. On the T, you're in Boston in 15 minutes. And we think that rents up there, it takes about the same amount of time to get downtown from the seaport as it does on the Blue Line from Revere.
Right.
And so that's kind of the value prop that we see there. It's a 5-acre site,
Okay.
give or take. It's 103 existing mobile homes. And the park is in relatively rough shape. A lot of police calls there. The city's been fantastic working with us to, manage, keep the park safe.
Yeah.
And our plan there is to discontinue the use as a trailer park. There's a 2-year statutory process that you have to go through to discontinue a manufactured housing use.
Okay.
The reason for that, and that's a state statute, obviously, right? The reason for that is that, while these things are called mobile homes, in a lot of cases, they're not mobile, and people have lived there for a long time. And you're asking somebody, in some cases, where they own a mobile home to pick it up and bring it somewhere else because they lease the land from us, which is a challenge.
Yeah.
And so, our plan as we go through the discontinuance of that park is we've been, I think, pretty generous with our buyouts of tenants, our relocations of tenants. We've located folks in buildings that Helge owns. We've located folks in other rental situations that we've identified.
Yeah.
We've helped people move out of state. And so we've kind of gone through that process, over the last year and a half. Our consultant down there is actually the same guy that helped Bob Kraft vacate a trailer park where Patriot Place used to be.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Jack Mula. Great guy, and really, understands the process in and out. And so that's kind of the process that we've been going through as we identify what it is that we want to do with the site ultimately. It's located in TED zoning, TED.
Okay.
And in that zone, you can do a ton of commercial uses. You can do distribution, office, warehouse, retail. There's a ton of uses that you could do at a 1.5 FAR.
Okay.
So it's 5 acres. It's got a lot of buildability.
Yeah.
Right. We think that the highest and best use for the site is housing.
Okay. Cool.
Probably has some affordability component.
Right.
And we're kind of working on our plan right now. We don't know exactly what it looks like, but that's the move right now.
To be continued.
to be continued.
All right. Well, we'll
working through it, and Cube 3 is looking at it with us.
Oh, cool.
Brian O'Connor and his team.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great firm.
Yeah.
Have you guys worked with them on any of the other buildings?
At Gansett, we have not. I used to work with them at Cabot Gavin Forbes. And I'm really happy to be working with those guys again.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So, I don't know what, so you're in it, we'll call it your, again, growing, obviously, where we're into bigger projects. We're probably 5 or 6 projects deep over the past few years. Is that about right?
Yeah, 6 as of now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So what are some of the key takeaways, right? Over, I think a lot of our...
Don't fuck it up.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Like what have you kind of, obviously you've learned a ton, right? We all learn stuff every day. I mean, that's kind of the fun part for me about this business, right? Is like you're getting so much exposure to so many different things, and obviously some of it can really suck, and you get some curveballs that you just can't foresee, and you're certainly going to swing and miss there, and then you got to figure out how to rectify that. But like, what are some of the biggest takeaways you've had, now that you're, let's call it, 7-8 years into this, and what are some of the things you're most proud of that you've been able to accomplish thus far, and what are some things that maybe some mistakes you've made that you can learn from and make sure you don't duplicate on the next deal?
Yeah, look, in terms of being proud of stuff, it's tough to tough to keep my head above water at any time. So, unfortunately, I haven't really taken the time to step back and look at a lot of the stuff that we've done. Obviously, 90O that you leased up. I mean, that project by the 75 units in Revere.
Yeah.
Built that thing, finished it 2 years ago. You guys leased it up. And, leased it up. I think we underwrote about 15 units a month absorption. I think you guys doubled that.
Right. Yeah.
And so that thing
stabilized pretty quick.
That was super quick, good, yeah. Like a few months.
Right.
Crazy.
And I mean, I think one thing too, and I remember talking about this with you at the time, and I would say, I don't want to speak for you, but one thing that, look, all of the people and companies that we work with have sort of, some different tendencies. I will say that you've really, like Lumen, crazy finish level, right? At the time for a condo at that, that market segment, marble baths, like that was just something that was sort of no one had been doing. And I think that helped, right? 90O was really interesting because you had a major competitor right across the street that had the, all these amenities, right? I mean, the building, Ryder's like 5 times the size of 90O, basically. Yeah, right? So you had 5 times, you had the ocean, like the true ocean frontage, you had pools, you had turbo amenities, and yet, we're the 75 unit boutique building across the street. And I think, again, finish level really differentiated you there.
Yeah, we had to.
Yeah.
In that location, because we were competing with those guys across the street.
Yeah.
Those guys are on the water, and we're just behind them back off the water. We had to differentiate in some way. Didn't have the amenities. We had some views, not the same views. And so we did go kind of above and beyond rental product spec on the finish, both in the amenity space but more particularly in the units.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, how much do you value that as you design your buildings? Because again, I think that's something that you've excelled at, right, and focused on. And I think it's paid dividends because the delta on the rents at 90O versus Ryder were certainly far less than I thought they would be. I remember talking to you about that. I was like, holy crap, we're only 3-4% difference when you kind of figured maybe it would be closer to 10.
Agreed.
So
yeah, I mean, there are reasons for it beyond, hey, we got to compete with these guys next door. You know, the other reason is that, again, we're not a merchant developer. We want to own this stuff forever. Yeah. And so, we want to use quality products that we're not going to have to replace in a few years. Yeah. Okay. A lot of guys look at it like that's somebody else's problem. Right. That somebody else is me. Yeah. So we do spend some time on finish selection, both because we want our stuff to look nice.
Right.
We spend a lot of time on design, but also because we don't have to replace it immediately.
Yeah. So one thing we've talked about, that like as you're growing, and obviously you've got some of these bigger projects coming here, is sort of the whole working in the business versus on the business.
Sure.
How are you balancing that, and is that where you want it to be yet? And what's sort of the path to getting you there if you're not quite where you want to be on that front at this point in time?
So the answer is no. I'm nowhere near where I want to be on that. I spend, up until very recently, dealing with some issues on a project. I was spending 90+% of my time working in the business. I was effectively a development project manager.
Right.
And a lot of that is, I'm not going to say it's intentional in that I wanted to be working in the business, but it was intentional in that we sacrificed, based on the structure of our deal with our capital partners, we hamstrung ourselves a little bit on fee income, which supports, our shop, pays the rent, pays employees, in favor of back end. So we worked out a promote structure and back end deal that is favorable in my mind. I think fair, but favorable. And the trade basically is that we're a little bit short on fee.
Okay.
And so it necessitates that I work in the business because I can't afford to hire 10 guys.
Right.
And so here we are.
Yeah.
I need to spend a little bit more time on our strategic planning, getting out there and, dealing with the city, looking at sites, but it is what it is. I spend a lot of time working on projects.
Yeah.
which I don't not enjoy.
Right.
It's just, it's not great for our long-term growth.
Yeah,
so.
that's all right. I think all businesses, and I can certainly speak for myself here at CHARLESGATE over, we're in year 20 here, it ebbs and flows, right? Like you start scaling up and, you go from a small company to a medium company, and then you're trying to, get to a larger company, and, you inevitably will have a push-pull between working in the business and on the business. And, it's just kind of nature of the beast, right? So you talked a little bit about along those lines. I know you're involved with an organization, EO.
Yeah,
right.
I am.
And can you just talk about that a little bit, and maybe some nuggets you get from EO that sort of help you as you navigate that push-pull we were just talking about?
Yeah, sure. We talk a lot about working in the business versus on the business. EO, it's a global network. Founders, CEOs, some other criteria you have to apply. But really the most impactful thing in EO I found is a thing called Forum, and they put you in a group. My group is 9 people here in Boston, but it's between 6 and 10
like the skulls.
people. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just like that.
Yeah, all right.
This is I'm wearing the logo.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm not even going to go into that logo because I asked you about it before, and I don't want to kill your street cred, but it's way cooler than anything I own. I know that.
So anyway, Forum, we get together once a month, strict on attendance, strict on communication protocol, all gestalt, all experience share, no advice. But it's been really helpful. You get to hear a lot about issues that other folks are dealing with in their businesses, varying in scale from as small as me to very large. We're all open and honest with each other, and it's been helpful because I'm a solopreneur here, right? So it's I'm talking to you. You're the only guy I get to talk to.
Tough break for you, but it's all right. All right. So what's we'll kind of get towards wrapping up here. What's something that you feel really strongly about that you think most people, like most developers, wouldn't agree with?
Wouldn't agree with that. I think that we have a tendency to be more open and collaborative in our communication with people who would typically be viewed as competitors.
Okay.
Right. So I've found that, in a lot of cases, you're not really competing with the developer you think you're competing with for the same piece of dirt. Right.
Yeah.
And just, I've been here in Boston this time since 2010. And I've got a lot of friends that do similar stuff in the city.
Right.
And, I found that you're better off than not, being very open about, what you're looking at, how you're doing it. And people have better ideas than I do.
Right.
And so, that being open and honest inspires some reciprocation. And I think a lot of guys are pretty tight-lipped about a lot of the stuff that they're doing. And, in some cases that's necessary, right? It's not public information,
right?
But I found it to be beneficial.
All right. Let's kind of talk a little bit outside of work, right? I know that you.
Thank God, finally.
Right. Jesus. Well, we can't, nothing too exciting, but I know one thing that you take a lot of pride in that you've been doing is I know that you go down to UConn and do some guest lecturing and whatnot. You talk a little bit about that and sort of how that happened and how often you're doing it and where
I love it. It's
really
really fun. Something that I didn't expect to enjoy as much as I do. I went to grad school at UConn. Okay. Graduated there in 2010.
2023 national champs.
Indeed. Let's go. Go Huskies.
Yeah.
And so I had a professor a few years ago asked me to go down and just kind of talk to a class, and it's become a more regular thing.
Cool.
Couple classes, couple of professors, and trying to work on now a case study for a class down there, which I'm super excited about, trying to spend some time on. That's not much more to it, but my guys call me professor now. I don't think in an endearing way.
Well, Professor, what's the best book you've read lately?
A couple. One I'm currently reading is called Fixer Upper. It's about affordable housing policy in the United States. Fascinating. And I actually just read the Michael Lewis book, The Undoing Project. Okay. About the founders of behavioral economics. Which is great.
Smarter than you look, man. You know, seems like some good reads. No, that's not true. So what's like what's a kind of fun and maybe not well-known fact about you?
Yeah, so you made me think about this one. So I forgot about Rob Lowe saved me from drowning in Steven Spielberg's pool.
What the hell were you doing in Steven Spielberg's pool?
So my aunt, when I was a kid, was a private chef.
Oh.
She was actually Steven Spielberg's chef.
Oh, shit.
And so I was at Steven Spielberg's house, fell in the pool, and Rob Lowe jumped in. I could swim, by the way.
Yeah.
But Rob Lowe didn't know that. So
Rob Lowe. Dean Youngblood. Some epic roles for that guy. That's awesome. You got a little Rob Lowe look to you, you know? Maybe rubbed off from the pool seating.
Stress, man. I'm going to need the same facelift.
Yeah, that's true. He did. That one's evident, right? Well, that's Rob Lowe's a great segue. You a TV guy, or a movie guy? What's
all of the above.
Yeah,
all of the above. I love a good series, though.
Okay, give me your number one all-time series. Is
number one. I've got a list. We'll go. I'm going to go The Wire.
Yep. Boom. All right.
The Wire.
There's been a few Wire references on Empowered Returns over the first few months. Yeah, that's my number one for sure. You know, if you know that, I know.
I didn't know.
I'm
not pandering.
No, I've watched all 5 seasons probably 7-8 times. Kind of the foundation of my marriage 3. Might be The Wire. I'm a big season 3 guy. The politics, Carcetti. Yeah, it's a good one. Stringer. We won't ruin anything for the audience, but anyways, big Wire guy. What else? Anything
TV
else?
show?
Yeah, like anything you got going now that you're into?
What am I doing right now? Now, look, I watch Succession, obviously, right? But I can't watch them current, so I try to avoid the spoilers. I have to be able to watch 3 in a row.
Okay.
So I haven't started the new season yet.
Okay.
But
yeah, it's tough with social media to not get the spoilers.
Yeah. Old Seinfeld's on.
You a Yellowstone guy?
Yellowstone?
Yeah.
It's a little bit compared to the HBO and Showtime shows. It's a little bit corny.
Yeah.
But you love Kevin Costner, so.
Yeah. It's actually they better pick it up in the second half of this current season because it's gone a little off the rails. But yeah. All right, man. Well, appreciate you coming in. It's kind of always great chatting with you and love what you guys are up to. I'm really excited.
One of my Chaitra that works for me in the office just graduated from Northeastern, so I want to say congrats to her, and she's got a birthday next week, so happy birthday, Chaitra.
Nice. All right. Yeah, we do shout outs and plugs on this podcast all the time. So Caleb Manchester, president of Gansett Ventures, thanks again for joining us, and thank you to our audience for tuning in to another episode of Empowered Returns.
Thanks a lot, PT.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Empowered Returns. If you're a forward-thinking real estate investor or developer looking for actionable advice that will help you generate market-beating returns, make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast fix. I'm Mike DeMella with CHARLESGATE, and I'd love to connect on LinkedIn and further the conversation for any specific questions you may have. Thank you for listening.